This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Today's show begins with Brian Briggeman, director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center at K-State, to discuss the health of cooperatives and what they do for their community, as October is Cooperative Month. Dean of K-State's College of Agriculture, Ernie Minton, continues the show by reviewing his recent statewide newsletter. We are also joined by Angie, Denton, and Mary McCurry to remind us about the Animal Sciences and Industry Family and Friends reunion. Completing the show is K-State horticulturist Ward Upham, as he encourages tomato and pepper growers to be ready to make the last harvest of the season before a frost or freeze occurs. That and more is coming up ahead on Agriculture Today. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we continue our show now discussing cooperatives as October is National Cooperative Month. And then to talk a little bit about cooperatives, we have Director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center at K-State, Brian Briggeman. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Shelby. It's a pleasure to be here.
Brian, before we talk about the landscape of how the cooperatives are doing now, a little history about how cooperatives came about.
Yeah. So if we look at the modern cooperative that we have today, whether it's a farmer co-op, a rural electric co-op, grocery co-op, a hardware co-op, a lot of the roots trace back to England in 1844, the Rokedale Society of Equitable Pioneers. They formed a consumer cooperative, came together to get fair prices and fair weights and measure on different goods that they were purchasing. But they came up with a set of principles that many co-ops today follow. If we look here in Kansas, so the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center, I do a lot of work with farmer co-ops. So I think the White Castles of the Plains, right, the grain elevators that are in many of our rural communities, do a lot of work with them. But if we look at their history, building off of the Rokedale Society of Equitable Pioneers, they figured out that we can do more together. That if we, in our case, bring our grain together, we can come to a place where we can have competitive prices. And this started in the early 1900s here in Kansas. So it's fascinating to look at that, how Kansas co-ops, in particular farmer co-ops, came about.
And so how have cooperatives just in Kansas kind of evolved?
Yeah. So again, starting back in the 1900s, the cooperative movement really got started, especially for farmers. In many cases, farmers at the time were not able to have a market to sell their grain or have competitive prices because at the time the railroads dictated that. But as they grew in size and scale and number, in fact, it was very successful, created a lot of value for farmers back in the early 1900s. So if we fast forward a little bit to the 1950s, we had a total of 364 total co-ops. That was our peak here within Kansas for farmer co-ops. But since that time, through various reasons, agriculture has changed a lot since the 50s. Technology is different, from biotechnology to mechanization to today we have drones. We had some different reasons for mergers and consolidation within farmer co-ops to the point where today we sit at 56 co-ops in the state of Kansas for farmer co-ops. So there's been a fair amount of change through the industry.
Obviously, agriculture and grain cooperatives are something very important to producers, but there are many other cooperatives that are really quite impactful.
Right. So, like I said at the beginning, I do a lot of work with farmer co-ops, but, rural electric co-ops provide a lot of power and energy to folks in not just western Kansas, but if you look at a lot of the suburbs of some of our bigger cities, Wichita, Kansas City, rural electric co-ops provide power there as well. We have a grocery cooperatives in the state who provide that service. Ace Hardware is a co-op. So if you think about your local, if you have a local Ace Hardware in your store, well, it's part of a purchasing cooperative. So it touches in many different ways beyond just farmer co-ops. But as many of your listeners probably pretty familiar with the farmer cooperative model.
And what is the health of the cooperatives right now?
Well, if we look out across the state, it's not terribly surprising that if you're handling a lot of grain coming off of a pretty tough drought year, things are challenging. For many farmer cooperatives, what drives a lot of the financials is handling volume. And when we have drought, that really can significantly hurt income statements, profitability, can hurt balance sheets when you look at a liquidity standpoint. So there are challenges out there. But there's certainly opportunities as well, too. As we look at, all types of co-ops, whether a big co-op, a medium-sized co-op, or a small co-op, it's all about creating value and opportunities for our members. And there are those investments that are occurring. There are uses of technology, building of relationships to where that value is created for the farmer to not only just see the value within the farmer cooperative, but for those co-ops to be relevant in a very competitive landscape that is out there today.
Talking about that landscape in rural communities, elevators are sometimes the landscape of the rural communities. And so what support do cooperatives have for those communities?
Shelby, it's interesting you bring that up about the landscape in the rural community. I always, when I talk with my students about co-ops and you think about farmer co-ops, I'm from Iuka, Kansas. And Kansas Co-op is the local co-op there. And whenever I go home, the reason Iuka has a skyline is because of the co-op, right? That you have those 2 grain elevators pretty prominent within that little community. But it is that those farmer co-ops in rural areas are very important. A while back, we did some research on just the economic impact of farmer cooperatives throughout the state. And one of the findings that came through that, and I still feel it would be relevant today if we updated the research, is that by creating a job at a farmer co-op, that helps support another job within the community. So it can actually help with job creation. And the thought process on that is through just that ripple effect, that if we have somebody employed within this community, that they're going to spend their money within that local community as well, which can help support a local grocery store, a local hardware store, a local business. So that was one of the findings that we found. But it's also, if you look out across the state, these local co-ops, are a significant employer in rural areas, also pay a sizable amount of taxes, property taxes as well. So that also helps provide support to many of our rural communities within Kansas.
And Brian, you are the director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center. And so giving a little bit of history about the center, when did it get started and how did it get started?
Sure. So the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center was formed in the 80s, and I would imagine your listeners either went through the 80s as a producer or somebody in ag, or like myself, have heard plenty of stories about it. It was a difficult time. So cooperative leaders in Kansas looked to Kansas State University in 1984 to create a center of excellence to help co-ops navigate this environment at the time when it was very turbulent, but also they knew times would get better. And that's when we need to really be moving forward. And how do we make the co-op better to improve farmers? So in 84, the Kansas Cooperative Council, which is still in existence today, the president and CEO of the Kansas Co-op Council is Brandy Miller. So the Co-op Council came to K-State and they formed the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center in the Ag Econ department. So we are a public-private partnership, which I think works great because as director, I can work closely with someone like Brandy. I work with an advisory council. I work closely with a lot of other cooperatives throughout the state to just try to understand, well, what are your needs? What research programming do you need? What education programming do you need? How can we help you improve and therefore create, a stronger, more viable rural area? I also like to bring up the center's namesake, Arthur Capper. I mean, there's a good reason for that. Arthur Capper, very prominent Kansan, was a former governor of the state of Kansas. In fact, if you go to Topeka in the Rotunda, he has a stone statue of him in there. But what his connection to co-ops is that when he was the U.S. Senator from Kansas, he helped sponsor the Capper-Volstead Act. And the Capper-Volstead Act is what gives agricultural cooperatives the ability to pool grain together and market it, and is not subject to various antitrust laws. So in effect, it's considered the Magna Carta of farmer cooperatives because it's what allows agricultural marketing cooperatives to operate the way they do today. So naming the center after Arthur Capper made a lot of sense.
And what are the different resources that this center has for producers?
Yeah, so if you're interested in learning more about the Capper Center, certainly can look me up. Just Google my name, Brian Briggeman. You'll see me and reach out to me. Or you could go to www.accc.ksu.edu. We have a lot of information there. We actually have an interactive map if you want to see the farmer cooperative landscape. One thing I should note, it needs to be updated. Earlier I said 56 co-ops in the state. Where we created the map, we updated it as of July and was at 58. So even since then, we've had a little bit of a change. So look there. And we also have a lot of fact sheets, which shares a lot of different research that the center has conducted, some of the stuff I talked about before with regard to the economic impact of co-ops in the state, but also to some recent research we did on director skills. So if you're a producer and would like to maybe know what it takes for serving on a cooperative board, we have some different research on what types of skills are needed there. But anyway, so those are some of the resources available on our website.
Brian, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and giving us an update on cooperatives.
Thank you, Shelby.
That was Director of the Arthur Capper Cooperative Center at K-State, Brian Briggeman. You can learn more about the center by going to accc.ksu.edu, which I'll link that web address in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead. You're tuned back into Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing the September statewide newsletter. And to discuss his newsletter, we're joined by K-State College of Agriculture Dean and Director of K-State Research and Extension, Ernie Minton. Ernie, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here and share these great stories.
Ernie, in this newsletter, you describe September as a transitional month. And so what do you mean by that?
Yeah, there are just a few, marquee things that always come around in September. Obviously, that's this state fair happening around the state of Kansas, obviously. But also students are back. They're getting into their coursework. And, it's the opening of a new academic year. Football season 2 has obviously started, and we just celebrated 2 weeks back the Celebrate Ag Weekend, and that was a lot of fun, very busy time, and a lot of effort by a lot of individuals that are dedicated to our success. So I really appreciate the effort that was put in, and I think this event is only going to get bigger and bigger as we move forward.
And some other exciting things happening at K-State. K-State researchers have recently received a $1.9 million grant from the National Science Foundation.
Yeah, that's right. So plant genetics is, obviously a focus of ours because we have a number of plant breeding programs that we support in the college. And so the basic side of this is a really important thing. And there are new technologies for gene editing that are coming into play with regard to plant breeding. And so it's moving forward very, very rapidly. So this is a great win for this group of investigators.
Another exciting thing that's been worked on at K-State, Alec Adam, a graduate student, worked on some pretty cool things this past summer.
Yeah, he's been working on a project looking at advances in weed seed destruction, new technology that should, in fact, help producers manage weed populations without maybe as much use of herbicides going forward. And so I know this group is very, very excited about that, including its major professor, Dr. Sarah Lancaster. So we're really be looking forward to the results of that study.
And K-State has also recently received a grant for Kansas energy projects.
Yes, renewable energy is something that's a priority for us. In this particular case, David Carter who's recently become the Director of Engineering Extension, has been a part of the Rural Energy for America program prior to coming over to K-State. David replaced long-term faculty member Bruce Sneed, who retired last June. And again, that opportunity for becoming engaged in renewable energy systems is an important one for Kansas producers to be aware of.
Another thing really important to producers is the U.S. Farm Bill, and someone's recently spent some time reviewing it.
That is true. So, yeah, we have a segment that focuses on our Flinchbaugh Chair in Agricultural Policy, Dr. Jenny Ift, and we're very, very happy to have her in that role. And, you know, one of the key things that that particular faculty position becomes involved with is ag policy that's embedded in the language of the Farm Bill. So she's doing really important work there, and now there has been recently an announcement of a new Center for Ag Policy that Jenny will be interacting with. The center itself is not housed in the College of Agriculture, but it's at the university level, which is an important thing because, you know, it's a statement of the university becoming more thoroughly involved in outreach work that Extension is part of.
Even after Flinchbaugh's passing, he continues to make an impact on K-State.
Yes, Dr. Barry Flinchbaugh was one of a kind, and we don't expect anyone to replace him, but we just celebrate his career here. And as a matter of fact, he will be inducted into the Agricultural Hall of Fame this week, actually, and we're going to be, several of us are going to be at that and be a part of that to celebrate his contributions to agriculture.
Ernie, the last story in your statewide newsletter was that community health boosts personal health. And what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think what's been highlighted here in this interview with Elaine Johannes is data that suggests that becoming civically engaged, in addition to doing work that is productive on behalf of rural communities, there are also health benefits that are related to that engagement as well, which is, a plus, a double whammy. And so this is really, really exciting work. And I think it really parallels, another audiobook I happened to listen to called The Wonder Drug, similarly, as one engages in helping folks and kind of that live to give way of going about things. There are health benefits associated with that. So this concept of being civically engaged fits with that notion perfectly.
And Ernie, as we've wrapped up September and are now in October, what makes you excited for this month?
We are continuing to work on the Ag Innovation Project. One of the principal goals when I became dean was to try to improve our facilities. And these things are moving along. The progress is really incremental, so you got to get used to that. But things are happening with regard to planning, design with architects, and those kinds of things that come along with planning buildings. And so we're really excited about that proceeding.
That was Dean of K-State's College of Agriculture and Director of K-State Research and Extension, Ernie Minton. I will place a link in today's show notes where you can sign up for his statewide newsletter. Before we cut to a break, we're now going to be joined by Angie Denton and Mary McCurry as they discuss K-State's Animal Sciences and Industry Family and Friends Reunion, which is coming up this weekend. Mary, to get us started, could you tell us just a little bit about this reunion?
We are so fortunate that somebody had the vision, actually Patsy Houghton and the group at Livestock and Meat Industry Council 9 years ago had this vision and to create this event, and we understand it's probably the only one of its kind in the country, to create and continue and celebrate the culture of the Animal Science and Industry Department that I think most of us that went to school here felt like and still continue to feel this amazing aura around the department and what it's created with its students and faculty. And to continue a tradition like that, or the culture, you really need an event that ensures the next generation coming on from little ones all the way up have an opportunity to gather and celebrate. And it's because it's not a fundraising event, it's very unique in that aspect. But we work really hard to make that event something that people look forward to every year.
And who are those people that might be attending the event?
Typically, it's the family. It's our animal sciences industry family, from our alumni to former students to anyone who's connected to our department, past judging team members, faculty, and staff. And it's all about reconnecting and catching up with those friends and family.
For the kids or even the adults who might be coming, there's some fun activities that are taking place.
We make sure of that. So I think from the moment they go through registration, the smiles are all over their face. And so the little ones we call head directly through the event into the junior barnyard. It's a magnificent tent full of unique, one-of-a-kind creations by one of our committee members. And so there's I call it an entertainment center there, as well as educational center, because we've been very fortunate to have the veterinary school involved with a couple of items such as the cow with the birthing presentations that the kids can actually do an actual experience with that, and also an equine area there too. So we've got that. We've got flag football. We've had bands before. We are so fortunate to continue to get the K-State marching band, and Willie, the Wildcat, is going to make an appearance this year, and we're very, very excited about that. So it's a little bit of everything for if you just want to stand and visit and see folks you haven't seen and get reconnected, or if you want to participate in events, we have those going on outside as well.
And, of course, a big part is the food. Being tied to the animal science industry, we have good beef, good pork. We have a milk bar for the kids of all ages to have milk. And, of course, we end the evening with the famous Call Hall ice cream. And another big thing of Family and Friends Reunion is we honor our Don L. Good Impact Award winner each year. This year we are recognizing Larry Cora, Professor Emeritus, who has had such a distinguished career in the livestock industry.
And for people who are wanting to attend this Family and Friends Reunion, when is it and when does it get started?
We are looking forward to, and mark this on your calendar, Saturday, October the 7th. Starting at 4 p.m., doors open for social and gathering time and kids' activities. It moves forward to the food line opening at 5:30, and our program and presentation is at 7:15 p.m. And for those football fans, know that this is the day after K-State plays OSU at Oklahoma. So if you're driving back home, this is the perfect place to pull in and cap off a great weekend with us. So we're very excited about. We have in the past tried to target having it on football game weekends, and so last year was our first moving off of a home football game in order to accommodate a lot of those families who have high school activities and other obligations through Friday evening. And I think we saw a lot of first-timers arrive, and we're so thrilled to be able to schedule. Everybody's busy, schedules are full, and we're going to try to accommodate and do some rotational basis. But this year it falls, I think, the perfect duo, football on Friday night and Family and Friends on Saturday.
That was Mary McCurry and Angie Denton. You can find out more information about this reunion and register for it by going to asi.ksu.edu/familyandfriends. I will also put a link for it in today's show notes on actoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be back with more ahead.
This is Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. Well, if you've been growing tomatoes or peppers this season, it's time to start keeping a close eye on the weather forecast. When you see the mention of a frost or freeze in the forecast, that's your cue to do one last harvest of tomatoes and peppers before a frost or freeze occurs. K-State horticulturist Ward Upham explains how to harvest and store the last of your tomatoes and peppers this season. Ward, an opportunity today to talk about some garden vegetables, looking at late-season tomatoes and also peppers from the garden. Now, along those lines, we're looking at what do we do as we get to the end of the season.
That's right. What we're worried about is that first frost. These are both warm season crops, and therefore we need to get them off the vine before we get a frost on them.
So the tomatoes will actually continue to ripen off the vine, so I guess picking them early is not a huge deal.
It's not. As a matter of fact, if you pick them at the breaker stage, which is the stage when they're kind of like half green and half red, they're not going to increase in quality after they reach that stage. And so during the season, I'll pick them at that stage all the way through just to make sure they don't get any bird damage or anything like that. And so those can be picked as soon as they reach that breaker stage. However, they can be picked a little bit earlier. And so if you get a frost in the forecast, you want to go out and pick everything that's mature enough. And so those that are red are mostly red. They're going to go in one group. Those that are just starting to turn are going to go in a second group. And those that are green are going to go in a third group. But if they're green, you have to look on the bottom of that fruit. If there's like a very faint whitish star on the bottom of that fruit, they're mature enough. When they mature, they're not going to be as good as those that are a little bit further along, but they'll be acceptable. They'll be adequate quality. And so you pick all those tomatoes, put them in those three groups, and then you can put them in trays or whatever. But make sure that whatever they're put in, you put newspaper on the bottom. Because if you get one that starts to rot and starts to leak, you don't want that to pass on to the others. And that newspaper will absorb some of that moisture so that the rest of them will stay okay. You have to check them pretty often. Make sure that if there is one that starts to rot, you pull it out of there. But that helps keep them going. And putting in those three groups, they'll all start to mature about the same time, at least in that tray. Just keep them at a fairly low temperature, about 55 degrees. That'll be about right. Don't refrigerate them. 55 degrees would be about right as far as ripening them up. And some people will be able to keep them clear into close to Thanksgiving.
And then I guess preservation is another possibility for those?
Yeah, so you can, if you had enough, you could can them or you could freeze them. There's a number of things you can do as far as preserving them for a longer period of time.
So what about peppers then? Are they more complicated, less complicated?
They are less complicated. They are a lot less complicated. We normally harvest peppers when they're immature. If they're still green, they're immature, but they're fine. I mean, that's good quality anyway. If they're mature, they're going to be a different color. Most commonly red, but they could be yellow, could be kind of a chocolate color. There's a number of different colors that they are when they're mature. And they may be a little bit milder in flavor, a little bit sweeter as well. But there's not that big of a difference, so most people pick them when they're mature. And so you go out and you pick everything that's big enough that you want, and then they'll keep in a crisper for quite a while, maybe 3 weeks anyway. And then if you want to keep them longer, what most people do is freeze them. Now, when you freeze them, what you don't want to do is cut them into little pieces and then put them all together and freeze them together. If you do that, when you take them out, they're all going to stick together. So what you do is you take all those little pieces, put them on a cookie sheet, and then freeze them. And then when you put them in a plastic bag, they will be separate when you take them out. And so it makes it a lot easier to get out just what you need and put the rest back in. So that's one of the tricks you can use in order to make sure that those peppers are easy to handle. If you have hot peppers, same type of thing, except you better wear gloves. And make sure you don't rub your eyes while you're working with them, because that hot is going to really do a number on you if you do.
This is a great way to make sure that you're really using everything that you've planted and everything that you've been able to harvest.
That's right. And so this is that last harvest of the season, and it can extend the season so you can get the most out of that garden.
That's K-State horticulturist Ward Upham with information on harvesting and successfully storing the last tomatoes and peppers of the season. For more information, contact your local county or district extension office. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.